3 days after a brutal storm tears apart Ethan Mercer's guest cabin, a stranger shows up on his driveway. Rail-thin, quiet, and carrying the kind of fear you can't fake. Her name is Hannah Cole, and she only asks for one thing: work. No pity, no questions. Just a chance. But Ethan notices something that won't leave his mind. The way she flinches at every sound. The way she saves half a sandwich like tomorrow isn't guaranteed. And the way she always looks over her shoulder like someone is hunting her. So when she walks away one evening, Ethan does the one thing he swore he wouldn't do. He follows her. What he finds in the woods isn't a secret lover. It's 4 children waiting on a broken porch calling her mama. And in that moment, Ethan realizes the storm didn't just destroy a cabin. It exposed a battle Hannah has been fighting alone. But the real question is, who is she running from? And what happens when that person finally finds her? Lesson. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't surviving alone. It's allowing the right person to stand with you. If you're ready for a story about courage, protection, and the kind of love that's earned, not given, hit like, drop a comment, share this with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. 3 days after a hellacious storm tore up his guest cabin, Ethan was about ready to just bulldoze the whole mess. That's when a quiet voice behind him said, "Mr. Mercer." He turned to see a woman standing at the edge of his drive. She was rail-thin, the kind of skinny that comes from going without. Her old jeans were cinched up tight, and her flannel shirt was more patches than original cloth. But her eyes, they were what got him. They were the eyes of someone who'd stopped expecting anything good from the world. "Can I help you?" he asked, keeping his voice low and easy. "Heard you might need a hand," she said, nodding toward the busted-up cabin. "I'm a hard worker." Ethan looked at her hands. Her knuckles were all scabbed over. "Heard from who?" "Martha, down at the feed store." That figured. Martha Yates had a hand in everyone's business. But looking at this woman all coiled up and ready to run, he reckoned this wasn't one of Martha's usual matchmaking schemes. "What's your name?" "Hannah Cole." "You got experience, Hannah Cole?" "I've cleaned, done repairs, plumbing. I work hard, and I don't steal," she said, looking him dead in the eye. He knew that look. It was the look of someone cornered, tired of having to prove they weren't what people thought. $15 an hour, he said. Cash at the end of the day. A flicker of relief crossed her face. Fair. All right, then. The cabin's got to be gutted. Tools are in the barn. Supplies are in the mudroom. Start when you're ready. She just nodded and walked toward the cabin, moving with a purpose that told him she was used to getting things done on her own. He watched her for a minute, then told himself he had his own chores to worry about. But by noon, he found himself walking back over. Hannah was on her knees, scrubbing black mold off the cabinets with a fury. The air smelled of bleach and pure determination. Her shoulders were set like stone under that thin shirt. He cleared his throat and she jumped, flinching like she'd been struck. "Need something, Mr. Mercer?" "Just Ethan's fine. Came to see how you're getting on. You need anything?" "No, sir," she said. That "sir" sat wrong with him. He was maybe 10 years her senior, not some old man. He decided it was best to leave before he said something clumsy. He came back a little while later with a turkey sandwich, the good kind with cheese from the farmer's market, and a thermos of hot coffee. He found her wedged under the bathroom sink, fighting with an old pipe. "Brought your lunch," he called out. She slid out, her face smudged with rust, her eyes locked on that sandwich like a coyote spotting a rabbit. "That's kind, but I'm fine." "When's the last time you ate?" he asked gently. "I had breakfast," she lied, her eyes darting away. "Just humor me," he said, setting the food down. She finally took the sandwich, closing her eyes for just a second as she took the first bite. The pure relief on her face made him have to look away. "Thank you," she mumbled. When the sun started dipping low, Hannah came out of the cabin. She'd worked 8 hours straight without a single break. He met her at the barn. "Finished for today?" "Yes, sir. Main room's cleared out. I'll be back at 7 tomorrow, if that's all right." Ethan counted out $160. "That's too much," she said, her eyes wide. "You worked hard. I'm the boss. I can pay a bonus if I want," he said, holding out the cash. "Take it, Hannah." Her fingers trembled a little as she took the money, folding it carefully before tucking it deep in her pocket like it was treasure. "Thank you, Ethan." She turned to leave, and that's when he saw it again. A quick, haunted look over her shoulder, scanning the tree line like she was expecting a ghost to jump out. "You need a ride somewhere?" he offered. "No, thank you," she said, already walking away fast, clutching that old bag. He watched her head down the county road, away from town and deeper into the woods. He told himself it was none of his business, but that scared look stayed with him all night long. The next morning, he was on his porch with a cold cup of coffee when Hannah arrived at 6:47, 13 minutes early, ready to get back to work. She jumped when she saw him standing there. "Morning, Mr. Mercer." He'd told her to call him Ethan, but the name sounded foreign on her tongue. Without another word, she got right to work, a blur of motion inside the old cabin. By noon, she'd ripped out rotten cabinets and scrubbed the floor clean. When he brought her a sandwich, she ate only half, carefully saving the rest. "Waste is a sin," she said, an old saying that sounded like it came from a hard life. He asked if she was religious. "I was raised to be," was all she would say, shutting the door on any more questions. For 3 days, it was the same routine. She worked hard, said little, and always left looking over her shoulder. On the fourth day, something in him broke. He knew she was in some kind of trouble, so when she left just before 6 that evening, he decided to follow. He gave her a 30-second head start before following in his truck, killing the lights when she turned onto a rough gravel road. The path got so narrow he thought he'd lost her, but then he saw a faint light through the trees. He parked and walked the rest of the way. What he found was not a house, but a shack, barely standing. And on the porch, he saw 4 little kids waiting. The baby cried out, "Mama!" a sound that hit Ethan right in the chest. Hannah's whole voice changed, becoming warm and soft as she hugged her children. The oldest girl, Sarah, proudly said they had made dinner. The kids swirled around her into the shack, a whirlwind of life. The truth hit him hard. She was not running from a problem, she was running to her family. He peered through a crack in the wall. The inside was one tiny bare room. In the dim light of a camping lantern, the children buzzed around her. Then he watched as she took out the other half of her sandwich, broke it into 4 small pieces, and gave one to each child. They ate it like it was a feast. When the youngest boy said he was still hungry, Ethan saw her hands clench into fists. She promised them eggs for dinner the next day, and their little faces lit up like she had offered them the world. Ethan stumbled back to his truck, shaking with a quiet anger. 4 kids living in a place that was not fit for animals. He did the math in his head. She worked herself to the bone for $15 an hour and still could not feed her own family. For the first time in his life, Ethan Mercer felt completely useless. He couldn't just offer her charity. That woman had too much pride, and getting the state involved would only wreck her family. The only real way to help was to give her more work. The next morning, Ethan was waiting on the porch when she arrived at 6:45. He saw a flash of fear in her eyes. "Got a proposition for you," he said, keeping his voice even. "The cabin's coming along fine, but the main house and the stables need a deep cleaning. I could offer you more hours at the same pay." Her eyes narrowed. He knew she was weighing the money against the time away from her children. "How many hours?" she asked. "As many as you can manage." "I can't work evenings," she stated firmly. "You set your own schedule. Whatever works for you is fine by me." She watched him for a long moment, searching for a catch. Finally, she nodded. "I can do 8 to 5 on weekdays, maybe a half-day Saturday." "That'll do just fine," he said. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Ethan, why are you being so kind?" The question caught him off guard. "Maybe I just need the help," he replied. She didn't look convinced, but let it go. He watched her walk away, feeling like he'd won a small battle. It was a start, but it wasn't nearly enough. Over the weekend, he made a plan. His house was huge, with entire wings gathering dust. There was more than enough room. But first, he had to know more about Hannah Cole. On Sunday, he drove to the feed store to talk to Martha Yates. "Ethan Mercer," she boomed. "Twice in 2 weeks. This must be a special occasion." "Very funny, Martha. I need to ask you about Hannah Cole." Martha's smile vanished. She led him to her back office and shut the door. "Why are you asking about her?" "She's working for me." "Bull," Martha said flatly. "I've known you since you were 17. You're getting involved." Ethan sighed, knowing she was right. "Just tell me what you know, please." Martha's look softened. "Hannah showed up about 6 months ago, desperate for any work I could find her. She's a hard worker who keeps to herself," Martha continued. "She has 4 kids, and they're all living in that old run-down Peterson cabin. That place ought to be torn down." Martha looked him straight in the eye. "She's doing her best, but raising 4 kids alone is tough." "Where's the father?" Ethan asked. "That's the million-dollar question. She never talks about him, but I know a woman on the run when I see one." The news settled heavy in Ethan's gut. "She doesn't have any family to help?" "Not a soul, far as I can tell," Martha said, patting his hand. "Whatever you're planning, go slow. Women like her don't trust easy. And Ethan, don't you dare let those kids down." He drove home with her words ringing in his ears. He knew what he was doing crossed a line, but he couldn't just stand by. On Monday, Hannah arrived at 8 o'clock sharp and got right to work on the dusty, unused guest wing. He tried to focus on his own tasks, but he kept listening to the sounds of her working upstairs. At noon, he brought up 2 sandwiches. He found her in a guest room, scrubbing the windows with a fierce determination. "Time for lunch," he said from the doorway. She looked flushed from the work, and for a second she just looked young. She took the plate and ate quietly. "How are the kids?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She froze, her guard instantly back up. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Martha mentioned you had children," he said gently. "I have 4, she said, her voice flat and cautious. "They are taken care of." "I'm sure they are," he said. "Listen, Hannah, I don't care if you have 4 kids or 14. You do good work, and that is all that matters to me." She studied his face, looking for the trap. When she found none, some of the tension left her shoulders. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." Hannah finally broke the silence. "Why are you out here all alone?" The question was blunt, and Ethan figured she deserved a straight answer. "This place was full once," he said, his gaze distant. "My ex-wife, she wanted a husband home for supper. I wanted this ranch. We both got what we wanted, I reckon." Her next question hit a little harder. "Do you get lonely?" He looked toward the far hills. "Sometimes, but that's better than letting folks down." Hannah just nodded slowly, like she knew that feeling deep in her bones. That night, he knew exactly the hardship she was driving back to. He knew she would stretch every dollar and every bite of food for her kids. He understood she would keep struggling until something finally gave. He decided right then he would be the one to change things. But he had to move slow and careful. That woman had a pride as tall as a longhorn, and one wrong step would send her and those kids running for the hills. He could see a storm coming for her, and he planned on being her shelter. So he started small. He asked her to straighten up his office, a disaster of papers that had been piling up for years. When he returned, the place was spotless. Every single receipt and manual was sorted and filed perfectly. He just stood in the doorway, completely stunned. "Hannah, I just meant tidy up a bit. This is incredible." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "I just like things to make sense." He saw his opening right then. "You know, I could surely use a bookkeeper. I would pay you $20 an hour." Her eyes went wide. "Oh, that is too much." "That is the going rate," he said firmly. "You are worth every penny of it." He watched her mind work, doing the math, figuring out what that extra money could mean for her children. Okay, she finally whispered. Thank you. That evening, he put his real plan in motion. He packed a box with office supplies right on top, but underneath, he tucked in fresh batteries, a thick new fleece blanket, protein bars, and vitamins for the kids. He left it on the kitchen counter with a simple note. From the barn, he watched her discover it. She froze when her hand touched the blanket. Her shoulders began to shake with quiet tears. He turned away, giving her the moment. When he looked back, the extra things were gone, tucked away in her bag. She never mentioned the box, but later that afternoon, he heard her humming a little tune while she worked. For him, it felt like winning a small but important victory. On Friday, he pushed his luck a little more. He cooked a huge dinner of roast chicken and potatoes, then told her he had made way too much. I would hate to see it all go to waste, he said, gesturing to the table. They both knew what he was doing, but the sight of a hot meal was too much to resist. She sat down, and after a bit of silence, she started to talk. She told him about growing up in Wyoming, with a strict preacher for a father. I always thought love meant giving up everything you are, she said softly. Then I met Caleb Ross. The way she said the name was as cold as a winter morning. Her voice only warmed up when she spoke of her 4 children. They are good kids. They deserve so much better. Her voice cracked. My 4-year-old son asked me yesterday if we could have meat for dinner. Just once. Ethan felt a cold anger rise up inside him. Where is their father? She let out a bitter laugh. Caleb is not one for sticking around, or for paying for his kids, and I do not have the money to chase him down in court. It is just better to survive, she said, her voice heavy with defeat. Before he could find the right words, she was up to leave. He insisted she take all the leftovers with her. Her hands shook as she took the containers, her thank you barely a whisper. After she drove off, Ethan sat alone in his big quiet kitchen and made a phone call. Jim, he said to his lawyer, I need you to find a man named Caleb Ross. His ex-wife is Hannah Cole. See what we can do about child support. His lawyer sounded doubtful. The system is not kind to women like her, Ethan. Then we will have to be kinder, Ethan replied. He saw her cabin in the daylight, and it was worse than he'd imagined. The roof looked ready to collapse. But on the porch sat her oldest daughter, Sarah, reading a book to her younger brothers. Baby Lily slept nearby in a crate lined with his fleece blanket. Sarah, no older than 7, patiently sounded out the words for the little ones. Ethan watched them, his heart aching. These kids, and their mother, deserved so much better. He knew right then he would provide it, no matter what it took. The trick was doing it without shattering Hannah's pride. On Monday, he had a plan. Hannah, he called out, I need to talk to you about the guest wing. The next day, he made her an offer. I'm going to start having clients out to the ranch. I will need help with cooking and serving. Evening work. I will pay you $30 an hour. She was suspicious, but he sold her a story about needing to look professional. She finally agreed, but said she would need to find someone to watch her kids. Or, he said, keeping his voice steady, you could just bring them here. I have got more empty rooms than I know what to do with. It just seems simpler than finding a babysitter. That is not right, Ethan. Why in the world not? She struggled to find a reason that would not give too much away. Because they are my kids, and this is a place of business. Hannah, Ethan softened his voice. I know where you live. All the color drained from her face. You went and followed me. I was worried. You are raising 4 children in a shack that is barely standing. I am giving you a chance to bring them to a warm and safe place while you work. That is not a handout. It is just practical thinking. You had no right to do that. You are right. I did not. I am sorry. He truly was sorry for snooping, but not for what he found out. Now that I know, I cannot pretend I do not. And I will not just stand by and watch you work yourself to the bone when I have the means to help. Hannah's hands clenched into tight fists. I do not need you to feel sorry for me. Good, because I am not. I am offering you a job with a fair wage. If your children are here while you do it, that just makes sense. He looked her straight in the eye. I am trying to give you a choice. She turned her back to him, her shoulders stiff. For a long while, the only sound was water dripping into the sink. When she finally spoke, her voice was just a faint whisper. Why do you even care? Because somebody ought to. That is not a real answer. Ethan chose his next words with care. My own daddy was a mean man who drank too much and thought being kind was a weakness. My mama was afraid of everything. I left that house at 17 because staying there would have been the end of me. I know what it feels like to have nobody, to feel like the world is just waiting to see you fall. He took a breath. I also know what a difference it makes when just one person gives you a chance and believes in you. That is what helps you truly live instead of just getting by. Hannah turned back toward him, her eyes filled with tears she would not let fall. And you reckon you are that person for me? I think I can be if you will let me. The air between them felt thick with hope and fear. One dinner, Hannah said at last. Just a trial run. If it does not work out, we never speak of this again. Deal. They shook hands, and Ethan felt a sense of victory bigger than any business deal. The dinner was set for Saturday. Ethan invited his accountant and his wife, folks he knew would not ask a lot of questions. He told Hannah to cook for 6 people, including herself. I am not about to sit at the table with your guests. Why not? You are doing all the cooking. The least you can do is eat with us. Ethan, bring those kids. They can eat in the kitchen if you want, but you are eating at the table. She put up a fuss, but finally gave in. On Saturday, Ethan heard the sound of tires on his gravel driveway. He looked out and saw Hannah's old car, a machine held together by little more than rust and hope. 4 car seats were squeezed in the back. The children spilled out, their eyes wide as they saw the ranch. Sarah, the oldest, held little Lily on her hip, looking around like a guard dog. Tommy and Sam stayed right by their mama's side. Kids, this is Mr. Mercer. Y'all remember your manners now. Hi, Mr. Mercer, they all said in small voices. Just Ethan is fine. You must be Sarah. He offered her his hand like she was a grown-up. She shook it, surprised to be treated with such respect. Yes, sir. This here is Lily, and those 2 are Tommy and Sam. It is real nice to meet y'all. Your mom is fixing to work in the kitchen. How would y'all feel about doing some exploring? All 4 kids looked to Hannah, who gave a slow nod. Y'all stick together, do not touch a thing. And you, listen to Mr. Ethan. The boys ran straight for the barn. Sarah followed behind with Lily, still taking everything in. Hannah stood there, wringing her hands. I am sorry. They are just so cooped up. They are kids. Let them run. He led her toward the house. Come on. I will show you the kitchen. She stepped inside, her eyes wide as she saw the professional stove, the huge pantry, and the marble countertops. This is beautiful. It is built to work. My mother loved to cook. He pulled out the menu they had planned. All right, you are the boss in here. Just tell me what you need. For the next 3 hours, Hannah was in her element. She moved with a confidence he had not seen before, preparing a feast of roasted lamb and vegetables with fresh bread that filled the house with a warm, promising smell. The kids would pop in now and then. Sarah found a book she wanted, permission to look at it. Little Tommy grabbed a basketball, asking to play, while Sam's eyes were glued to the piano, his fingers itching to play a tune. Hannah handled every question with a calm smile, but Ethan saw the exhaustion building behind her eyes. She was a mother trying to work, stretched thinner than a barbed wire fence. He called to the oldest, Sarah, how would you feel about being the boss of your brothers for a little while? There is a television in the den, and I have plenty of movies. Sarah stood up tall, her face serious. I can handle that. Ethan smiled. I know you can. You're a natural at looking after them. A bit of the worry left her young face, like she had been waiting for someone to finally see her. Thank you, sir. Once the children were settled, a quiet peace fell over the kitchen. As Hannah cooked, she hummed a soft tune, and the tightness in her shoulders began to ease. After a bit, she turned to him. Can I ask you something? Of course. Is this business dinner tonight for real? Ethan paused, then decided on the plain truth. Well, yes and no. My friend Jim and his wife are coming over, but I did not invite them to talk about business. I invited them, he continued, because I figured you deserved a practice run before I start having you cook for real clients. Hannah's hands stopped mixing the salad. So this is all just a big excuse to feed my children. This is me giving you a job you are good at, for a wage you have earned, he said plainly. If your children get a good meal out of it, that is not charity. That is just good sense. She looked him straight in the eye. You are not nearly as slick as you think you are. Never said I was slick. You are a manipulator, she said, though without any real heat. And you probably have some kind of hero thing going on. He stepped closer. I am also right. You are good at this. And those children of yours deserve more than beans and rice. Her jaw was tight as a dozen emotions crossed her face. Finally, she said, I do not know if I should thank you or hit you. How about you finish making that fine dinner, he said with a small smile, and we will see how you feel after. A tiny smile touched her lips. Deal. The dinner was a huge success. They ate like kings and queens, feasting on lamb, fresh vegetables, and bread with real butter. Ethan watched little Sam's eyes grow wide with his first bite of meat, and saw Sarah carefully cutting up food for her baby sister, Lily. When they were done, Ethan could see Sarah still eyeing the last of the bread, her hunger not quite satisfied. He spoke softly. Sarah, there is some ice cream in the freezer, both chocolate and vanilla. Would you all like some? Her face lit up brighter than a Friday night football game. Really? Really. Help yourselves. Later that evening, after his friends had gone and the kids were asleep in a happy pile in the den, Hannah found Ethan on the porch. Thank you, she said, her voice quiet, for tonight, for everything. She stood beside him, looking out at the dark pasture. Sam asked if we could live here. He said it is the prettiest place he has ever seen. What did you tell him? I told him we have our own home, and that this place is just for visiting. Ethan wanted to say this could be their home, but he knew it was not his place. You are welcome here any time, he said instead. I know, she whispered, then gathered her sleeping children and drove off into the night. The big house felt empty again, but something had changed. The next week, Hannah started bringing the kids with her every afternoon. She did not ask, she just showed up with them. They did their homework at his big dining table and played in the yard under Sarah's watchful eye. Ethan found himself coming in from the fields early, around 3:30, just to see them. He started stocking the pantry with juice boxes and graham crackers. Hannah saw it all but stopped fighting his help. She just learned to say thank you with a tired grace. About 2 weeks later, Ethan walked in to find Hannah crying in his kitchen. Not quiet tears, but the big ugly sobs that come from a place of deep hurt. She was clutching her phone, her other hand pressed to her mouth as if to hold back the sound. Hannah, he said, rushing to her side. What is it? What happened? She showed him the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. It said, Found you. I am coming for what is mine. It was signed with one name, Caleb. And just like that, the storm he had been sensing on the horizon had finally arrived. The words on the screen sent a chill down his spine. When did this come? He asked, his voice low and hard. 20 minutes ago, she said, her hands trembling. You need to call the sheriff. That is what you need to do. She gave a harsh, broken laugh. And tell them what? That my ex-husband sent me a text? They will say it is a family matter, that they cannot do anything unless he actually hurts me. He is threatening you, Hannah. He will say he just wants to see his children. We were never officially divorced. I just ran. She buried her face in her hands. I thought I was far enough away. I thought he would never find me. It does not matter how he found you, Ethan said, his mind racing. He did. And now he is coming. There was only one clear choice. Stay here, he said. Hannah looked at him, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. What? Tonight, you and the children stay here. If he shows up at your cabin and y'all are not there, it buys us time. Ethan, I cannot just move my family into your house. Why not? He challenged. You are already here most of the time. And if this Caleb fellow is serious, I would much rather you be somewhere with good locks on the doors and a man who knows how to use a shotgun. The word shotgun made her flinch, but she did not argue, which told Ethan just how scared she truly was. Just for tonight, she finally agreed. As many nights as you need, he replied. They gently carried the sleeping children into the spare rooms. Sarah woke for a moment, her eyes instantly alert. Mama, what is wrong? Nothing, sweetheart. We are just going to have a sleepover at Mr. Mercer's house tonight. It's a sad thing when a man has to run from his past, but it is a whole other kind of wrong when a woman and her children are the ones doing the running. That injustice is exactly why Ethan knew he had to help, no matter the cost. You can learn a lot about what is right by standing up for the underdog. Little Sarah's eyes, sharp and knowing, found Ethan's. Is he coming, Mama? She whispered, and Hannah's face lost all its color. A heavy silence filled the room, a clear enough answer for the little girl. The younger boys, Tommy and Sam, stirred at the mention of their daddy, a fear so deep it seemed like they were born with it. I do not know, Hannah said, her voice trembling, but we are safe here with Ethan. It was a promise he hadn't spoken, but he sealed it with a firm nod to Sarah. He got them settled in the guest wing with 3 rooms all close together. He brought out fresh sheets, towels, and found an old playpen for the baby, Lily. There is plenty of food in the kitchen, he told Hannah. The doors are locked, the alarm is on, and my room is just down the hall. As he went to leave, she grabbed his arm. Ethan, thank you. He just shook his head. You do not have to thank me for doing what is right. In my life, what is right has not always been what is common. The sorrow in her voice hit him hard. He wanted to promise her the world, but for now, all he did was squeeze her hand. Get some rest, he said. We will figure this out come morning. But sleep never came for Ethan. Instead, he sat in his office, a glass of whiskey untouched, making calls to folks who owed him one. The first was to Jim, his lawyer. Ethan, I need everything you have on a man named Caleb Ross. His record, where he works, anything. The ex-husband? Jim asked. What has happened? He found Hannah, sent her a threat. I need to know who I am dealing with. Jim was quiet for a second. How deep are you in this, Ethan? Deep enough. Just tell me if you can help. I can help, Jim said. Give me till sunrise. And Ethan, if this fellow is dangerous, you call the law. I will, Ethan lied. Just get me the information. His second call was to Miguel, his ranch foreman of 15 years. Miguel, I need you to keep your eyes peeled for a stranger asking about Hannah Cole. If you see him, you call me right away. Do not talk to him. Is this trouble, boss? Just being careful, Miguel. She has a past that might be trying to catch up to her, and I aim to keep her and those kids safe. Understood. I will tell the other hands to be on watch. The last call was the toughest. He dialed his sister, Rebecca, a top-tier family lawyer out in California. Ethan, what is wrong? I need some advice, Beck. Hypothetically, if you were trying to protect a woman and her kids from an abusive ex, what is the smart way to do it? Rebecca's voice sharpened. Are we talking hypothetically, or are we talking about a real woman who works for you, whose ex just found her? It is real, he admitted. She is scared, and I do not know how to help without making it all worse. Rebecca went straight into lawyer mode, asking about divorce papers and custody agreements, none of which existed. All right, she said finally. Here is the hard truth. Without any court papers, both parents have equal rights to those children. If he shows up and wants to take them, legally, there is not a thing you can do to stop him. A cold dread settled in Ethan's gut. That is crazy. That is family law, she said. Now she can file for divorce, for sole custody, and a protection order. But that all takes time. In the meantime, she is exposed. So what do I do? You document everything, every single text and phone call, and you make sure she is somewhere safe. She is here at the ranch, he said. You are in deep, are you not, little brother? She sighed. I am just helping someone who needs it. I know, she said. Men like her ex do not like losing control. If he thinks you are taking what belongs to him, things could get ugly. Let them get ugly, Ethan said, his voice low. I am not backing down. I know. Send me her information. I will find her a good lawyer who will help for free. But Ethan, you promise me you will be smart about this. I promise. After hanging up, Ethan finally felt the full weight of the situation. This was more than just a job or a place to stay. This was stepping right between a desperate woman and a violent man. He should have felt scared, but all he felt was a calm resolve. He heard light footsteps and found Hannah in the kitchen, peering out into the black night. Could not sleep? He asked gently. I keep feeling like he's out there in the dark, she whispered. Just watching. He is not, Ethan said firmly, and if he were, he would have to come through me first. That is what I'm afraid of, she said, turning to him. You do not know Caleb. You do not know what he can do when he gets angry. Then tell me. She hugged herself tight. It started small, telling me what to wear, who I could see. He said it was because he loved me and wanted to protect me. Her voice was empty, just stating facts. Then it got worse. The yelling, the holes in the walls, he never hit my face, always my stomach or my ribs, where the bruises would not show. Ethan's jaw was tight enough to ache, but he let her speak. I stayed because my father taught me divorce was a sin, and Caleb told me no other man would ever want me with 4 kids. But one day he grabbed Sarah, our daughter. She was only 5. He bruised her arm just because she talked back. In that moment, I saw my future. I saw my daughters learning that violence was love, and my sons learning that this is how men treat women. So that night I took the kids and I ran. Her hands trembled. I have been looking over my shoulder ever since, just waiting. He is not taking you back, Ethan said, moving closer. And he is not taking those kids. I do not care what the law says. We will fight this properly. Why? She asked, her voice breaking. Why do you care so much? I know enough, he said softly. I know you are a good mother who works harder than anyone. And I know what it feels like to be all alone, to think no one is coming to help. And you think you are coming for me? She asked. I am already here. She stared at him, then stepped forward and pressed her face into his chest, her body shaking with quiet sobs. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight as she let out months of fear. They stood that way until the first light of dawn broke across the sky. Thank you, she managed with a weak smile. I am just glad I am not alone anymore. As the sun came up, his phone rang. It was Jim. What did you find? Ethan asked. Caleb Ross, age 33, Jim said. He has 2 prior arrests for assault and a conviction. He's also currently wanted in Montana for skipping out on his court date to pay for his children. Wanted? As in there is a warrant out for him? A bench warrant, yes, Jim confirmed. It is not a high priority for law enforcement, but it is real. Ethan, this fellow is bad news. He has a history of causing trouble wherever he goes. If he wants those kids now, it is not because he suddenly decided to be a father. Then why? Ethan asked, his knuckles white as he gripped the porch railing. Could be anything. Control, revenge, or maybe he just needs them for some government benefits. Whatever it is not about love. So what are our options? Hannah needs to file for divorce and ask for emergency custody right away. With his record and that warrant, she has a strong case. But she has to be the one to do it, Ethan. It must be her choice. I know, Ethan said. I will talk to her. He walked back inside and found Hannah in the kitchen. She was making breakfast, with Sarah carefully cracking eggs into a bowl while the other kids played nearby. It was such a peaceful, normal scene, and for a second Ethan could almost forget the danger that was heading their way. To ask about, "There is a storm coming, Hannah. Can we talk for a minute?" She looked at Sarah. "Honey, can you watch the boys?" "Yes, Mama." They went into Ethan's office. He explained what Jim, his lawyer friend, had found out about her husband, Caleb. When he was done, she stood there in silence. "If I file for divorce, he will know right where to find me. He already knows. That text message proves it. Filing the papers makes it a real fight." "Hannah, it has been a fight since the day you left. You have just been fighting all by yourself. This way, the law is on your side. You will have a real chance to protect those kids. What if the judge gives him custody? Then we appeal. We keep fighting, but we will be fighting smart, not just scared." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I am so tired of being scared all the time. I know, if I do this, there is no turning back. No, there is only moving forward." She gave a slow nod. "Okay, let us do it." They spent the morning with Jim, who came out to the ranch. He brought a stack of papers for Hannah to sign, from the divorce petition to a request for emergency custody and a protection order. Every signature felt like she was starting a war. "This gets filed this afternoon," Jim said. "Caleb will be served within 72 hours. He will have 30 days to respond." "And if he comes here before then?" Hannah asked. "You call the police, then you call me. With these papers filed, if he tries to take the children, it is a kidnapping charge." "You are doing the right thing, Hannah." She did not look so sure, but she signed the last paper. After Jim left, a heavy silence fell over the house. The kids felt the tension and became quiet and clingy. Hannah tried to act normal, but Ethan saw her hands shake. He wanted to promise her it would all be okay, but he did not believe in making promises he could not keep, so he just stayed near. The call came 2 days later. An unknown number rang on his phone. "Mercer. Is this the fellow who has been with my wife?" The voice was mean and full of gravel, just what Ethan expected. He kept his own voice steady. "This is Ethan Mercer. Who am I speaking with? You know good and well who this is. Where is Hannah? If you are Caleb..." Some men just can't let go. For Hannah and her kids, running from Caleb was supposed to be a new beginning, but he was a storm on the horizon, fixin' to ruin everything. This story is about how far a good man will go to protect a family that is not his own, and why sometimes you have to make a stand. If you have ever felt trapped, you know what is at stake. When Caleb called, his voice was pure poison. He knew Hannah had filed for divorce. Ethan tried to tell him to talk to the lawyer, but Caleb did not care. He just wanted his kids. Ethan shot back, telling him he had abandoned them. Caleb's voice got louder. "Those are my kids, my wife, and I am coming to get what is mine." Ethan told him they were people, not property. Caleb's threat came out low and mean. "You do not know who you are messing with, Mercer. When I am done, you will wish you never heard of Hannah Cole." Then the line went dead. Ethan called the sheriff right away. He knew a piece of paper would not stop a man like Caleb. He found Hannah in the kitchen, teaching little Sarah how to make bread. The peaceful scene made the news he had to deliver feel even heavier. He told her what Caleb said, leaving out the ugliest parts but keeping the danger clear. "He's going to come here," Hannah said. It was not a question. "Probably," Ethan answered. "But we will be ready." That night, Ethan taught her how to use a shotgun. After getting past her first jitters, she was a natural, her hands steady. "I never thought I would be this kind of person," she said, after hitting 3 targets in a row. "You are the kind of person who does what it takes to protect your kids," he told her. They practiced until she could load and fire without a second thought. 3 days later, Caleb showed up. Miguel's call from the front gate was tense. "Boss, we have got a problem. A fella is here demanding to see Hannah. He is drunk and carrying a tire iron." Ethan's orders were simple. Keep him right there. Call the sheriff. I am on my way. He drove like a bat out of hell, calling Hannah on the way. Lock all the doors. Take the children to the master bedroom and do not come out until I say so. He could hear her moving quickly, her voice staying calm for the kids. We are moving. Be careful, Ethan. The lie that he always was tasted bitter in his mouth. Caleb looked just as mean as Ethan had figured. He was pacing in front of the gate like a caged animal, swinging that tire iron. Miguel and 2 other ranch hands stood between him and the house, looking casual but ready. Open this gate and let me see my family, Caleb demanded. Ethan stood his ground. I cannot do that, Caleb. With a roar, Caleb slammed the tire iron against the metal gate. You have got no right to keep them from me. Ethan reminded him that he had been served divorce papers. Caleb's face flushed with rage. He started spewing awful lies about Hannah, calling her a thief and worse. He pointed the tire iron straight at Ethan. She's got you all twisted up, probably doing whatever it takes to keep a roof over her head. The insult was meant to start a fight, and Ethan could feel his men tense up beside him, ready to jump in. The hot anger that flooded Ethan was dangerous, but he kept his voice deadly calm. You need to leave. The sheriff is on his way. Just then, the sound of sirens carried on the wind. Caleb heard them too, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. This is not over, Mercer, he screamed as he ran for his beat-up Ford truck. He peeled out, spraying gravel everywhere, just seconds before the sheriff's car arrived. Sheriff Morrison took a statement, but they all knew the truth. Until Caleb actually crossed the line, their hands were tied. You have got good security, Morrison said. Keep your eyes open and call us first if he comes back. Ethan found Hannah and the kids huddled in the master bedroom. Little Sarah held the phone, ready to call 911 if she had to. Is he gone? Hannah asked, her voice trembling. For now, he said. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a fear that tore at his heart. He is not going to stop, she whispered. He will burn it all down before he lets us go. Ethan looked at the small family before him. When Sarah looked up and said, "Thank you for protecting us," he knew he would make the same choice 100 times over. This was a war, and he was in it to the end. The next attack did not come with a tire iron, but with a stack of legal papers. Caleb was fighting back through the courts. Their lawyer, Jim, laid it all out on the dining room table. He is filing for joint custody, Jim said. He is claiming you abandoned him, and that you are an unfit mother living with another man. Hannah's face went white. He is twisting everything to make himself look like the victim. Jim pointed to another document. He is also asking the court to make you go back to Montana for the hearing. The fear in Hannah's voice was plain to hear. Can they make me go back? Jim told her they could fight it, but it was clear that Caleb was not just going to disappear. This was only the beginning of a whole new battle. Jim laid it out plain. The problem is, on paper, those kids do not belong here. To the court, they are just passing through. Ethan did not hesitate. Then we fix that right now. Before the sun went down, the children were enrolled in school, had doctor's appointments, and Hannah was applying for a new driver's license. This is all too much, Hannah said, completely overwhelmed. I am not being charitable, Ethan replied. I am building a case that says these kids are home. From the back seat, Sarah's small voice cut through the quiet. Mama, please let him help. That settled it. The hearing was in 3 weeks, and Jim was working around the clock to get ready. Jim gathered proof of Caleb's violent history. But Caleb hired a slick lawyer who painted a different picture. Hannah, the unstable runaway, shacking up with a rich rancher. They will say I am just after your money, Hannah worried, her hands trembling. I have seen this happen before. Folks believe the story they want to, not the truth. Ethan took the legal papers from her. Then our story will be louder, and it will be backed by facts, not lies. You keep saying we, Hannah noted quietly. This is my fight, too, Ethan said, his gaze steady. It has been from the start. In that moment, she surprised them both by leaning in and kissing him. It was a soft, uncertain question. I am sorry, she whispered, pulling back. Do not be, he said, his voice a little rough. But you need to know, I am not doing this for that. I know, she replied. That is why I did it. Before he could say another word, she was gone, leaving him feeling like the ground had just shifted under his feet. As the hearing got closer, a new rhythm settled over the house. For children who only knew chaos, simple, normal things felt like magic. Ethan found himself part of their daily life without even trying. He wrestled with third-grade math, learned to braid Sarah's hair, and left blankets on his floor for Sam's quiet, middle-of-the-night visits. You are good with them, Hannah said one morning, watching him flip pancakes. They trust you, and they do not give that away for free. They are good kids, Ethan said. Hannah's voice went cold. Their father called them burdens. He said it was my fault he was stuck with them. The cruelty of it made Ethan's blood burn, but he kept his voice even. Then he is a fool who never deserved them. 2 days before the hearing, Caleb showed up again. Not at the ranch, but at the kids' elementary school, playing the victim. He stood on the sidewalk with a sign about a father's rights, handing out flyers with old family photos. He told anyone who would listen that his ex-wife had run off with his kids to live with some rich man. When Hannah and Ethan arrived, Caleb put on a show for the crowd. "Baby, do not do this," he pleaded, his voice full of fake sorrow. "I have changed. I am sober. I just want my children back." Hannah walked right past him without a word, her face like a pale mask. But just as Caleb was soaking in the sympathy, a clear voice cut through the air. "You are a liar." Everyone turned. It was Sarah, standing at the school door with her brothers right behind her. "You are not my sweetheart," Sarah said, her voice trembling but strong for a 7-year-old. "You are the same mean man you have always been. You hurt us, and we are never going back." The crowd went quiet, their expressions shifting from Caleb to the little girl. Caleb's friendly mask dropped, replaced with pure rage. "You little brat!" Ethan immediately stepped between them. "You need to leave, now." "Or what, rich boy?" Caleb sneered. "You cannot buy your way out of this. Those are my kids." Just then, Sheriff Morrison's car pulled up. "Mr. Ross," the sheriff said calmly, "you are causing a scene. It is time for you to go. I can either write you a citation or you can leave. You choose." Caleb snatched up his flyers, but not before aiming a final threat at Hannah. "Enjoy this, because on Thursday a judge will see your lies and my kids are coming home." He stormed off, but the damage was done. That night, Ethan found Sarah on the porch steps. "Is he really going to take us away?" He sat down beside her. "He's going to try, but we are going to fight him with everything we have. But what if the judge makes us go? Then we will keep fighting. We will not give up." She was quiet for a second. "I meant what I said. He is not my father. A real dad would not scare his kids." "You are right. He would not." "Are you going to be our dad now?" The question hit Ethan hard. "I do not know, Sarah. That is complicated." "Why? You live here, you take care of us, and you make Mama smile. Seems simple to me." "Your mom and I are not married, Sarah." "Then you should get married." Ethan sighed. "It is not just about marriage. It is about what your mom wants and what you kids need. I cannot just decide to be your dad. We would all have to choose that together." "I choose you," Sarah whispered. "I do not know about the others, but I choose you." He pulled her into a hug. "That means more to me than you will ever know." The day of the hearing was cold and gray. Jim, their lawyer, met them on the courthouse steps. "Just remember what we practiced. Answer the questions. Do not get defensive. And tell the truth." Judge Catherine Martinez had sharp eyes and looked like she did not put up with any nonsense. Caleb was at the other table, cleaned up and playing the part of a concerned father. It was disgusting. Hannah testified first, led by Jim through the history of her marriage and the abuse. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook when she described the night Caleb grabbed Sarah. The judge made a note. Then Caleb's lawyer started in. "Mrs. Ross, you claim my client was abusive, but you never once filed a police report. Why not?" "I was scared." "Or maybe there was nothing to report." "Maybe you're making all this up." "No. You say you were worried about your children, yet you took them to a run-down cabin with no heat. I did the best I could. And now you are living with Mr. Mercer. How did that happen?" He offered me a job that includes a place to live for you and 4 children. What exactly are you doing for that kind of generosity? Jim stood up. Objection. That question is out of line. The lawyer just smiled. I will rephrase, he said. Mrs. Ross, are you in a romantic relationship with Mr. Mercer? Hannah's face turned red. That is not your business. Now, tell the court how you and your children moved into Mr. Mercer's home just weeks after you started working there. Explain how that was not taking advantage. Tears welled in Hannah's eyes, but her voice was firm. He offered us a safe place when we had nowhere to go. He fed my children when they were starving. He showed us kindness when all we knew was cruelty. I did not trick him. I just accepted help from a good man. Her raw honesty stunned Caleb's lawyer for a moment. Next, it was Ethan's turn. He talked about Hannah's job and the awful condition he found her old cabin in. He described Caleb's threats over the phone and the terrible scene at the school. The lawyer asked, Mr. Mercer, you are a rich man. Why did you help this specific woman? Ethan answered simply, because she needed help, and I could give it. The lawyer pressed on. Is it not true you were drawn to her from the very start? Ethan paused. I admired her strength and her love for her children. Is that what I asked? Were you attracted to her? Ethan looked at the judge and knew only the truth would work. In time, yes, I was. The lawyer pounced. So you saw a desperate woman with 4 kids and decided she would be a fine addition to your big, lonely ranch? That is wrong and offensive, Ethan said. Is it? The lawyer sneered. You have only known her for 2 months and you are already playing house, telling her kids to call you a real dad. You see nothing wrong with that? I see a woman and her children who are being hurt, Ethan countered. I see a man who left his family and now only wants them back so he can control them. And I see my part in all this is to make sure they stay safe. How very noble, the lawyer mocked. If the court gives my client custody, will you finally back off? Ethan knew it was a trap. I will accept what the court decides is best for those children, he said. But I will also make sure the court knows every single fact before it makes that choice. The hearing went on for 3 more long hours. Miguel testified about Caleb's threatening behavior. Martha spoke of Hannah's good character. The school principal described the incident with Sarah. Then Caleb took the stand, playing the part of a changed man. I made mistakes, he said, his voice full of fake emotion. I know I drank too much, but I have been sober for 6 months now. I have a new job and a house for us. All I want is to be the father my kids deserve. During cross-examination, Jim asked, You say you have been sober 6 months, but were you not drunk when you threatened folks at Mr. Mercer's ranch 3 weeks ago? Caleb faltered. I had a couple of drinks. I was upset. Or were you drunk and waving a tire iron around? Jim then produced a document. Mr. Ross, is it true there is a warrant for your arrest in Montana for not paying child support? That is just a misunderstanding, Caleb stammered. A misunderstanding that led to a warrant. According to these records, you owe $17,000. You have not made a single payment in over a year. Does that sound like a father who cares? Jim's voice cut through the quiet courtroom. You are telling me you could not find $17 a week for your children? Or was it that you just would not, because you were mad that Hannah finally left? In the hallway, Caleb tried to corner Hannah with a fake syrupy apology. Ethan stepped right between them. This is not your business, Mercer. Everything that concerns Hannah concerns me. Caleb sneered. You think you know her? Ethan's voice went low and dangerous. What she is like when she is being terrorized. Made to feel worthless? Yeah, I know exactly what she is like. She is strong, and she's a better parent than you will ever be. Back in court, Caleb's lawyer painted Hannah as a gold digger. Jim painted Caleb as a controlling bully who just wanted to dodge his responsibilities. Then, Judge Martinez promised a decision in 48 hours. The wait was pure misery. The call finally came on a gray Thursday. Jim's voice was calm. The judge has made her decision. Be at the courthouse in 1 hour. Judge Martinez looked directly at Caleb. Mr. Ross, you claim to want what is best for your children, but your actions show otherwise. No financial support. A history of violence. No contact in over a year. Then she turned to Hannah. "I am granting you sole legal and physical custody." The relief washed over Hannah in a wave, but Caleb exploded. "This is not right. You cannot just give my kids to her." Judge Martinez's voice cracked like a whip. "Mr. Ross, you will control yourself or I will hold you in contempt of court." Caleb's face was purple with rage. "I will appeal this. I will fight it." "You will do nothing," the judge said, her voice like ice. "Because if you continue, I will revoke all visitation and issue a permanent restraining order." Outside, Jim warned them. "He can still appeal." "Let him," Ethan said. "We will beat him as many times as it takes." Driving home, Hannah felt like she could finally breathe again. But that feeling did not last long. Up ahead, they saw thick black smoke rising from near the main house. Ethan floored it. When they got closer, the terrible truth was clear. The old Peterson cabin was on fire, and spray painted across the barn in jagged red letters was a message. "This is not over." Ethan's foreman, Miguel, ran up to the truck. "Boss, everyone is okay. No one was hurt, but whoever did this knew we would all be at the courthouse." They cut the power to the security cameras and disappeared. Ethan watched Hannah's face crumble as the last of her old life went up in smoke. The fire chief confirmed his worst fears. This was arson, Ethan. They poured accelerant all around the cabin. I would bet my pension it was Caleb Ross. "The problem is catching him will be tough," the chief said. "A man this full of rage does not just give up. He will be back to finish what he started. Y'all need to watch your backs." Sheriff Morrison arrived and issued a warrant for Caleb's arrest, promising a deputy would be stationed at the ranch 24 hours a day. But it did not feel like they were being protected. It felt like they were under siege, waiting for the real storm to hit. The fear was so big it choked the tears right out of him. "Is our old house really gone?" Sam asked, his voice barely a whisper. Hannah ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, baby doll. It's gone." He looked up, his little face all twisted. "Did we do something bad?" She hugged him tight. "Oh, no, sweet boy. This is not on you. None of it is." Sarah, wise beyond her years, looked straight at Ethan. "It was him, wasn't it? Our daddy." Ethan knelt down, so they were eye to eye. "We reckon so, but the sheriff is on his trail. He's not going to get away with this." Sarah's voice was flat, like she was stating a fact from a book. "He always gets away with it. He hurts people and just vanishes." Ethan shook his head. "Not this time. This time is different." But the look on that little girl's face told him she'd heard empty promises her whole life. Later that night, around 2 in the morning, Ethan found Hannah in the kitchen, just staring out into the blackness. "He said this wasn't over," she whispered. "And I know he meant it. No piece of paper from a judge is going to stop him." Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee they wouldn't drink. "So what do we do?" Hannah gave a dry, broken laugh. "Run? Hide? Spend my whole life scared? I'm just so tired of it, Ethan. So dang tired of him running my life even when he's not here." Ethan's voice was steady. "Then we don't run. We stand our ground, and we fight." She turned to him, looking like she might break, but with a fire in her eyes. "Why are you doing all this? For real? Nobody would blame you if you told us to leave." He took a breath. "I would blame me. The truth is, somewhere between watching you work your fingers to the bone and seeing you love on those kids, I fell for you, for the whole lot of you, and I don't walk out on people I love." Tears started sliding down her cheeks. "Ethan, I'm not asking you to." He shook his head. "I know. But I need you to know this ain't charity. This is me choosing to be right here by your side, 'cause I can't imagine being anywhere else." She closed the small space between them and kissed him, a kiss full of certainty and relief. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. They just stood there holding on to each other while the world was quiet. 3 days later, they found Caleb's pickup at a rest stop in Wyoming, stripped clean. But the lab boys found what they needed. "He's on foot or in a stolen ride," the deputy told Ethan. Either way, he's a cornered animal now, and he's likely headed back this way. Ethan turned his ranch into a fortress. More cameras went up, and he taught Hannah how to handle the shotgun again, making sure it was always close. The kids felt the tension. They played quieter and started asking if the doors were locked. Sarah became a little mother hen, always keeping her brother and sister in sight. It about broke Ethan's heart to see them living under a shadow of fear. A couple of weeks went by, and life tried to find a new normal. They almost started to feel like a real family. They almost forgot they were living on borrowed time. The other shoe dropped on a Tuesday night. Ethan was woken up by the sound of shattering glass and the scream of the alarm. He grabbed his pistol and met Hannah in the hall. She was holding the shotgun, pale, but her hands were steady. "The kids," she said. Just then, Sarah appeared, clutching a walkie-talkie. "He's at the kitchen window. I saw him." Ethan's voice was low. "Good girl. Now go with your mama and lock the door." He moved toward the kitchen, his heart hammering against his ribs. He found Caleb halfway through the window, bleeding and looking wild-eyed. "Get out of my house," Ethan said, his voice dangerously calm. Caleb stumbled inside, pulling a big hunting knife. "Your house?" he slurred. "She's supposed to be mine. They're all supposed to be mine." Ethan shook his head. "Hannah was never a piece of property. She's her own woman." Caleb lunged, swinging the knife like a madman. "You took everything from me." Ethan sidestepped, the knife slicing a hot line across his arm. "You did that to yourself, Caleb." They wrestled, crashing over the kitchen table. Caleb was smaller, but he was fighting with the strength of a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose. "I'll kill you," Caleb hissed, "and take my family back." A deafening blast shook the room. It wasn't Ethan's pistol. Hannah stood in the doorway, the shotgun raised. She had fired wide on purpose, but it froze Caleb in his tracks. "Get away from him," she said, her voice shaking but hard as nails. "The next one won't miss." Caleb turned, his face crumbling. "Hannah, baby, I just wanted to talk." Her eyes were like ice. "Understand what? That you'd rather see us dead than see us happy without you? Oh, I understand just fine. I gave you 100 chances, Caleb. Every time you laid a hand on me, I prayed it would be the last. But it never was." The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance. Caleb's face twisted with desperation. "If I can't have you, no one can." He didn't lunge at Ethan. He lunged for the hallway where the children were hiding. Hannah fired again. This time she did not miss. The shot took him in the leg, and he went down screaming as the knife skidded across the floor. Ethan kicked it away and put his knee in Caleb's back, holding him down as deputies flooded through the door. Caleb looked up at Hannah, his face a mask of hate and defeat. "You've killed me. Without you, I'm nothing." Hannah looked down at the man who had haunted her for years, and her voice was clear and steady. "That's not my problem anymore." Deputies burst through the door moments later. They arrested Caleb right on Ethan's kitchen floor as paramedics bandaged his leg and Ethan's arm. Sheriff Morrison arrived and surveyed the damage with a grim face. "This is breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, and violating a restraining order," he said. "He is looking at serious time in prison, Ethan. This is not a custody issue anymore. It is attempted murder." Hannah sat at the table, trembling. The children huddled close, Sarah still holding the walkie-talkie. "Is it over?" she whispered. "Is it really over this time?" Morrison watched Caleb being loaded into an ambulance, still screaming threats. He looked back at her. "Yeah, this time it is over." The trial was surprisingly fast. The evidence was overwhelming, from security footage to fingerprints on the knife. The jury took less than 3 hours to reach a decision. Guilty. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison with no chance of parole for at least 10. His rights as a parent were taken away for good. He would appeal, they knew, but it would not matter. He had lost everything. Hannah cried tears of relief. That winter, a peaceful quiet settled over the ranch. Christmas came, and for the first time in years, Hannah felt like celebrating. Ethan, of course, went all out with a giant tree and piles of presents. "Let me spoil them," he insisted. "They deserve it." On Christmas morning, the living room was filled with happy noise. The kids got books, art supplies, and a small piano keyboard. Hannah opened her own gifts, touched by how thoughtful each one was. Finally, Ethan handed her a small, simply wrapped box. "Now, before you get any ideas," he said softly, "just open it." Inside was a single old brass key. "It is the key to this house," Ethan explained. "It is your house now, if you want it. You and the kids belong here, for as long as you want to stay. No other conditions." Hannah looked at the key, then at the man who had become her world. "What if I want to stay forever?" she asked. He smiled. "Then I guess I had better get used to a full house." She reached up and touched his face. "What if I want a real partnership?" His smile grew wider. "Well, then I suppose I ought to make an honest woman out of you." Sarah looked up from a new book. "Are y'all going to get married? Would that be okay with you?" Hannah asked her. Sarah pretended to think hard. "I guess so, as long as Ethan keeps making pancakes on Saturdays." "And you make Mama smile," Sarah added, her own smile lighting up her face. Ethan looked at Hannah and saw his whole world right there in her eyes. "Well, then I reckon I better keep on doing all that." They got married that spring, right in the living room. Judge Martinez said the words, with the kids as their witnesses. Hannah wore a simple white dress she picked out all on her own, and Ethan couldn't wipe the grin off his face. The kids cheered louder than a rodeo crowd when they were pronounced man and wife. Life on the ranch settled into a new kind of normal, one built on a love that had walked through fire. Turns out, Hannah had a real head for business. She took the reins of the ranch's finances and turned it into something truly special. The kids just blossomed. Sarah finally let her guard down, and Tommy took to ranching like a duck to water, trailing after Miguel every chance he got. Sam wrote songs on his keyboard, and little Lily was a whirlwind of pure joy. Ethan adopted all four of them, making it official on paper what was already true in their hearts. They took the name Mercer, leaving their old life, and the name Ross in the dust. On the anniversary of the fire, they stood where the old cabin had been. Hannah had planted wildflowers all around the cleared space, life taking back the land. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked her softly. "Fighting so hard for this?" Hannah looked back at their home, where the sound of their children's laughter spilled out the windows. "Not for a single second," she said, taking his hand. "This is what I was fighting for. I just didn't know it was you." Hannah gave him that smile that always made his heart jump. "We found each other, and we have chosen each other every day since." And that, Ethan thought as he watched the sunset paint the sky, was the real story. It was never about a rescue. It was about two broken people finding their way back together. It was about four kids who learned that family is about who shows up and stays. It was about a wealthy rancher discovering that the richest he would ever be had nothing to do with his bank account. Years later, when folks asked how they met, Ethan would just smile and say he hired her. Hannah would always add that he followed her home and found a whole lot more than he bargained for. Then they would share a look that said more than words ever could, and one of their kids would roll their eyes and tell the real story, about a mother who fought like a cornered badger for her babies, about a man who learned the best investment you can make is in people. It was about a family built not on being perfect, but on choosing each other, flaws and all. They didn't live happily ever after because life just is not that simple. But they lived a full, messy, and beautiful life together. They lived free, building a future that was all their own. And in the end, that was worth more than all the money in the great state of Texas. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.